Um, Happy May 1st. I'm recording this on May 1st. I'm still working on the lattice pattern. I believe that when I return to record on Sunday, we'll be off to another part of the road. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of deer um, while I'm weaving. I'm going to go the reach across the whole width of my robe, and I'm going to do that twice, and then one more time for weaving take up. So that's how I measure my the length of my wefts. So that was my blue one, and I'll make the same width and I'll measure it from the yarn that I just measured. And then I also will measure one more because I don't always want to have to do that. I want to be able to have one strand that is the length that I want. So this process should only have to be done once. Then you keep a yarn that is the length that is correct because you've used it and it was a correct length. So when you first start out, you do that. You measure it and then you keep an extra one. And if it turns out that it's perfect, then you keep using that length. But if it turns out that it's too long or too short, then you need to adjust it the next time you cut a weft. And then that will be your measuring weft. So now that you've measured the wefts to the correct length, then make the tails even. And then the very first thing would be you always pair the two side cords. So I told you I wanted to talk about the deers. And what made me think about the deer is that, now see that I don't know if we're pretty close, but there's just the slightest, the black border is slightly lower than that blue. And like I said before, we start handling we handle two pairs and there'll be two rows. But this enters with just the one row. So that's why every once in a while you want to add a free row by just turning that corner, making sure that you're twill twining these little three, and always pairing that the side cords. Then you turn the corner. This turn is what I like to call the Naheen turn. So this, you're here and you want to go turn to the opposite direction. So you take that one that was going to be in the front of those two warps and move them over the back one and then behind one. Well, not with the side cord. You go always behind two because you never break those side cords up. And you never include them in any kind of a design count. Okay, so then I'm to the point where I need to add the black. And so I'm going to take the black length and make the ends even and fold it over and grab those two blue weavers and then bring the blue to the back because you only want black in the front. and then you go behind 2 warps. And then you take the top black and the top blue, and you're going to use those. That's the pair that's going to run ahead. And these I just leave alone. Right now I'm going to show you though that because I took both those blues behind 2 warps, then I can't start weaving the way it is now. I have to take that blue one in the back and bring it behind just 1. And that way it's going to break the pair above and create the twill twining. I'd also like to say that this is weft-faced weaving, because you don't see the warp through those wefts. Okay, so I'm going to pick up the first pair, and I'm taking this blue. It's going to go around, down, and straight back and behind 2. Okay, so essentially if you look at that movement, this black is going under the blue and push to the back again. And that is a Z twine. You can go back and listen to why the weavers often do S twine in this modern day and age with the modern wefts. Okay, so now I've been working with the black in the front, but now I want to bring the yellow or the blue forward. So I take and I go under the blue and go to the back. And there I've got the blue forward. I'm going to take the time to slip knot these long lengths. It just helps things to become more manageable. Okay, so I was talking about deer. In the ancient times of the Northwest Coast, with the many disagreements, the many trade and war that we had with each other and with our neighbors, there was a way of having peace, to make peace after there had been a disagreement. And one of the major ways that they would do is to send a member from the clan or the village over to the enemy, over to the opposing people. Okay, wait, before I get on to my story, I've got to make sure that I'm following this pattern correctly. I'm glad I went back because instead of just grabbing, going behind 2, I need to go behind 4. Okay, so yes, they needed to have a ritual, a socially accepted way of making peace. And the Tlinkits and the Haidas had designated a person from both sides to exchange places in the clan house or in the village, because they needed to establish trust again. And so these people who were exchanged, they went to live in those places that were not their home. And and I'm not really sure the length of time. I've seen stories, heard stories that it was the length of a whole year that the designated deer, would stay in those villages and establish the trust again. And so what made me think about that is when I was reading about the Spanish Juan Perez in the ship Santiago that came to our up here in Haida Gwaii, they came and when I was reading the other day about the spoons, I said how there was two, according to the Spanish friars witnessing, there was two Haidas that went aboard the Santiago, and then there was two sailors who went aboard the canoe. So that only makes me think that this concept of establishing trust and guaranteeing the safety of the people who visited on the big new terrifying large ships, they were invited to go aboard, but they would not go aboard unless there was the same amount of people, with probably the same amount of people that would be entrusted with the Haidas. So that's what, as I was reading this, I was thinking, yes, it wasn't the Europeans that established that that behavior. It was the indigenous people, and it all stemmed from the ancient times and traditions of establishing peace and trust, and that was an indigenous thing. So a lot of times also when I'm reading these early explorers and early traders journals and diaries, I see that every once in a while it'll be, there was a European who was left off in that village. Okay, so I was talking about the deer and how the traders even were obligated to take part in that traditional behavior of establishing a trust, or making sure that the people that went on board those big ships would be safe, that they would take the Europeans into their canoes while their own people were up on the decks of those big sailing ships. So it's an ancient tradition that you find in many of the stories that were passed down in oral history from time out of mind, is this tradition of the deer. And I'm sure that they wore different garments that designated them as the deer. So when they were in another house, they slept in the host house, that they automatically were identified as the accepted stranger within that house, or the accepted stranger that was in that village, that what they wore probably proclaimed that status of being a deer. And there probably is like masks and other paraphernalia that was used during the portrayal, like in the feasts when they portray a story or an event. They probably had special regalia and masks and maybe whistles, things that when they were pantomiming the whole event, that they would have those special regalia and things. So looking back and seeing that the explorers and the traders, they stayed off our coast, and they really didn't influence us too much into our villages initially, like the first 100 years. But right away, we instilled our traditions on them, that if they wanted someone to get on board, they would have to have some of their crew get on to the canoe, and that's was witnessed in 1774, the very first contact. So how brave is that? You know, all these strange people, and you put your demands and requirements to them. So anyway, history is exciting, and it's comes alive when you can think about how those traditions affect their life then, and how it has come through the ages and can affect our lives. Okay, I guess I hope you have a good weekend.